take just a moment to meditate on those words. Amen. Thank you. So for those who haven't seen the computer here before, my sermon today is being broadcasted live on the internet, on my YouTube channel, and it'll be archived. Just my sermon. So it hasn't been going on prior to this, and will not be going on after my talk. Mainly, the hope is that Eileen potentially will be watching it up in Oregon. Right. And if she's not watching it now, she can watch it once it's recorded. So my talk today is called The Levels of Love, and I'll explain why I chose that name. But I wanted to start with an article that was published, shared it on Facebook, I think, last week. And it was rather controversial for some, but the article said that psychoanalysis is having a resurgence in the mental health field. And I know that when I first shared the article, there were people who messaged me on Facebook and said, so, you're telling me that all Freud's crazy ideas are getting a resurgence? That's a frightening idea. The Oedipus complex and all these things. And what I found is that the article was not actually saying that. The article was saying is that there is a fundamental part of Freud's theory that has become truth. I may even say, because I like making jokes, but a gospel truth for psychotherapy, in that it's about relationships. That's the main thing that has resurged in therapy because of Freud, is the importance of relationships. Therapy, you can do all these really nice techniques. But the thing that therapists in training, the thing that I've learned is that you can do all these fancy things, but it is the relationship. It's the therapeutic alliance that between two people. Changes that occur for the clinician as well as the client. And I really thought about that and have been thinking about that and have been able to experience the truth of this idea. And I started to think that, the core of everything is the relationships that we have either with each other, with our hobbies, things that we enjoy in life, and also our relationship with the divine. And at the core of these relationships really is the concept of unconditional positive regard, empathy, compassion, and love. And what does that mean for all the different manifestations that relationships and love have for us in our daily lives? And the reading from Swedenborg that Jim read, and this is a long passage, and it continues past this point from number 394. He introduces the three universal categories of love, and then he goes about, as Swedenborg does, to really just drive this idea home. He gives us a really nice visual. This was one of the first passages I had read from Swedenborg when I first started reading him. And I thought, okay, I need a passage from Swedenborg. When I was coming up with this sermon, I thought, I need a passage from Swedenborg about love. So I went to heavenlydoctrines.org and I plugged in love. And this was the passage that came up. And I said, okay, well, then it was meant to be. This was one of the first passages I had read from Swedenborg when I was first reading him, because he uses the image of a house to describe the levels of love. And being a complete Jung nerd, Jung also uses the images of a house to describe the levels of the mind, and so does Swedenborg. So the three levels, on the ground floor is the love of ourself. Not the selfish love, though. These are the loves that are described as we are caring about our community, we might love our hobbies, we have certain positive passions that we care so much about. But we have to go down to the basement sometimes. In the basement, it can be the repository of some really, really negative things. Swedenborg says that down there in the basement, he says demons can be down there. And these are, what he means by that is, these are passions that can become our selfish passions, our lust, our greed, the things that carnal. And if we spend too much time in the basement, we might get stuck down there with these things. So sometimes we have to get a breath of fresh air. We move up to the top floor. The top floor of the house is the love of the divine and the love of the neighbor. And Swedenborg's ideal situation is that we spend equal time in all three levels, that all three levels become unified. And the danger is if we focus too much on just one of these levels. And if we start to think that we can use one of these levels to manipulate other people or to really just care about ourselves, our own position in one of these levels. Now, this idea of needing an alignment of all three, they're all working in unison to reach a positive goal, is really illustrated in our Old Testament reading from 1 Samuel. I had heard the phrase, "Oh, how the mighty have fallen." I don't know how many of you have heard that phrase. I've heard that phrase completely out of context. Movies, books, had no idea that it was from the Bible. So 2 Samuel is where it's from. And again, I wanted to find a story that would illustrate love, companionship, and found the story of Jonathan and David from 1 Samuel. This story, the setup of the story, is that Jonathan is the son of Saul, of King Saul. And Saul really represents someone who is stuck in the basement. And not in a good way. He's stuck in the basement, he doesn't go up to the higher levels. Saul was very paranoid about losing the favor of the children of Israel. He was trying to defend his kingdom, but he did not want to lose. He was obsessed with people liking him more than anyone else. And he was jealous of David, because here is David, this young boy who's killed Goliath. People doubted him, and he has done these amazing things. He's defeated the enemies of Israel, and people are cheering for David. And Saul doesn't like this. Even worse, Saul's son Jonathan has become best friends with David. And that tips Saul just completely over the edge. Because the threat, and he can see this, that Jonathan doesn't really care if he becomes king. Jonathan can see that David is a natural leader. So that really threatens Saul, because Saul wants to have this dynasty, he wants to pass things on, he wants people to love him. But what's interesting about this passage and the language, this story has been interpreted throughout the centuries in many different ways. More recently, contemporary culture, it's been interpreted potentially of LGBTQ, positive love. The language is so precise, and I don't think that the language is meant to be ambiguous, that their souls were knitted together, that Jonathan gives David these personal possessions. And Swedenborg talks about the correspondences of what each one of these items means. But Jonathan really represents the transition from selfish love, we're in the basement, Jonathan is like the ground floor. So Jonathan represents the bridge between getting out of the basement, kind of crushing those really selfish, greedy tendencies and moving up to a higher level. But a place where you can really see the relation between David and Jonathan is when Jonathan dies. Spoiler alert, sorry. In 2 Samuel, we find out that Jonathan and Saul are both killed during this battle. And Jonathan passes all these personal effects to David. He gives him his armor, gives him his sword, his belt. These are very important things for a warrior to have, and yet he gives them to David, knowing that David will use them better than he can, because Jonathan can see that David is with the Lord, and the Lord is with David. Well, unfortunately, Saul and Jonathan are both killed. And there's this beautiful lament that David gives at the very beginning of 2 Samuel chapter 1. It's actually where the phrase is, "Oh, how the mighty have fallen." And he says that his love for Jonathan was so much that it surpassed any love that he had with any women. So whatever the nature of their relationship was, it was profound. But symbolically, their relationship was that Jonathan is transitioning us from the basement to the middle, the ground floor, and David is the upper floor. So David really needed Jonathan for the support items that he needed to get us from the transitional place up into the upper floor with the love of the Lord and the neighbor. And Swedenborg says that the relationship between Jonathan and David is our relationship with the Lord. That is what their relationship signifies in terms of correspondences. And there's one episode where Jonathan eats some honey. He's hungry and he's kind of out with the army, and he eats some honey, and his mind is illuminated to the truths of the Lord. And that's when he really realizes that David is meant to be king, and not his father, not him. Illuminated to the truth of the relationship with God. Another passage that I've picked here is the Gospel of Philip. And this is a pretty controversial passage. This is one of the passages that sparked the Da Vinci Code. Theories that Jesus had married Mary Magdalene and had kids. There's that theory. But I think to take that passage literally is to miss the whole point of it. But it is controversial. It's a Gnostic text. Mary Magdalene, according to Gnostic theology, Gnostic Christian theology, represents wisdom. And wisdom illuminates the mind. So as Jonathan had some of this honey and his mind was opened up, he reached enlightenment. To embrace wisdom is to have light, to come out of darkness. We can get into the discussion of did Jesus, did he really have a relationship with Mary? But certainly what he's telling the disciples is that you need to have wisdom. And as Swedenborgians, we sort of take this for granted, right? Our idea of God is divine love and wisdom. But it's good to be reminded that you need love and wisdom together to have a balance. And there are times in our lives, I feel, that we feel that we are alone, that we don't have a relationship with other people. We may have moments of doubt with our relationship to the divine. And this will cause us to feel a heavy separation. I'm really thinking of the lament that David had for the death of Jonathan and Saul. Because at that moment, even though Saul was at times trying to have David killed, he loved Saul. And these two major men in his life were killed. And David, in his lament, after his lament, he turned to the divine for the support that he needed. And I find that in moments where I feel like I am alone, that is what is immensely helpful for me, is to remember that I'm not. I'm reminded of the support that I have from the divine, the love that I feel when I'm in community with all of you. And I feel that is, for me, when I think of Valentine's Day, that is, even though it's a day that we meditate on this, I feel like it's something that we can carry on throughout the year. And I want to end with a poem from Rumi. I feel like clichely, this is probably the best way to do this. I was going to read his poem about the reed flute crying out for separation, but I thought that's kind of a downer. So I wanted to read one called The Ship Sunk in Love. Should love's heart rejoice unless I burn? For my heart is love's dwelling. If you will burn your house, burn it, love. Who will say it's not allowed? Burn this house thoroughly. The lover's house improves with fire. From now on, I will make burning my aim, for I am like the candle. Burning only makes me brighter. Abandon sleep tonight. Traverse for one night the region of the sleepless. Look upon those lovers who've become distraught and like moths have died in union with the one beloved. Look upon this ship of God's creatures and see how it is sunk in love. Amen.